Hello everyone, I got glasses! I can finally read and see and all the good things that glasses entail. Today I actually wanted to talk about a common question that I've gotten since I started giving writing advice. And strangely enough, that has to do with mistakes, which makes sense because everyone wants to know more than just what to do, they want to know what not to do. So I'm gonna go over my top 5 mistakes that I see beginning writers make. Now, these mistakes aren't just exclusive to beginners. Anybody can actually make these mistakes. The first step to correcting it is always to realize what you're actually doing wrong. And then the better you get as a writer, the easier it'll be to avoid these things. Number 1, wasted words. A lot of new writers are concerned about writing enough that it qualifies as a substantial novel, or they're concerned about writing enough about every single scene that the reader can picture it perfectly in their minds. Every beginning writer worries about this, but I've come to realize, as most writers do at some point, that I have plenty to say. There's no need to over-explain a scene, and oftentimes, the reader can build an image in their mind with minimal description from you. A huge cause of this is actually excitement for writing. You're finally doing it. You're finally sitting down to write the story that's been in your mind for God knows how long. But sometimes at the end of a writing session, you may find that you've written 1,600 words about your character brushing their teeth and picking out their wardrobe. You're on the right track if you're excited to be writing, but you need to make sure that you weed out all of these extra words in the editing phase. To keep yourself from falling in the wordy McWord trap, you should periodically ask the question, is this part really necessary? You should always make sure that each part you write contributes something to the story. If it's not developing your character or creating suspense, adding tension, or setting the scene, then you probably shouldn't take the time to write it. Some people might think, well, I want people to know exactly what my character is wearing, so the scene feels real. Specific questions like this, I often find that there's an easy solution for. So, in regards to clothing, you can always describe the type of clothing that your character wears, and then you don't have to talk about it again. For example, you can mention that your main character loves to dress in casual, comfy clothes, and then you don't really have to go into specifics anymore. Then, every time after that you mention them getting dressed, you can just say, they got dressed. The reader already knows that that person likes a particular type of clothes, so they're probably not going to draw up this crazy off-the-wall image of what your character's wearing. Your readers are pretty smart. Just make sure you don't shove a bunch of description down your reader's throat, because really, no one wants to read about your character brushing their teeth unless the toothpaste has poison in it or the neighbor's house blows up at that exact moment. Number 2, not enough voice. Or I should just say, problems with voice. This is one thing that sometimes takes writers a little while to figure out, their own voice. I think 2 things affect the type of voice that you have: the stories that you tell, and then the way that you tell them. And when reading a novel, this can sometimes be the feel of the novel. Your voice can be brief, eloquent, lyrical, fast-paced. Every author's story feels different in some way, and this is what you want. Many times, writers can be drawn to a particular subject because they're passionate about it. And passion is very important for writers. The way that each person writes that story, though, varies greatly depending on the sentence structure, word choice, and individual stylistic preferences. Stephen King's Little Red Riding Hood would sound nothing like Marissa Meyer's because they have different voices, even though they would both be about Little Red Riding Hood. Finding your voice can take time, and unfortunately the best way to do that is to continue writing. But you can also find your voice through reading, and which things you don't like and which things that you love. Over time, you'll end up incorporating these small things into your own writing and molding your own unique voice. It's good to be different from one another, so you should never try to copy somebody else's voice. If you're inspired by someone's voice, that's a different thing. I actually found myself guilty of this after rereading a bunch of the Harry Potter books, because who doesn't love J.K. Rowling's voice in those books? I subconsciously adopted her voice and felt like a total creep when I reread what I had just written, because it wasn't my voice. I was being an imposter. So don't steal someone else's voice, because your reader will probably know. Number 3, lack of conflict. Or too much. I need action in a story. If I get to the end of a chapter and nothing has physically happened, I am not a happy camper. I don't need explosions and heavily panted running in every single chapter, but physical things need to occur. And oftentimes the best way to do that is through conflict. Now, there can be internal conflict and there can be external conflict. And I think each chapter needs at least one of these. When I read all about a character's day and nothing happens, it gets really boring. I've said this before, but each word that you choose is precious. So you need to hook your readers and then keep them hooked. And a really good way to do that is through conflict. So pretty much, things just need to happen to your character. And if you reflect on your own day, sometimes things just don't go your way. In the long run, they may not necessarily be relevant to your storyline, but it's kind of a bonus if they are. There is such a thing as too much conflict though. A balance must be maintained, as with most aspects of writing. There was one particular TV show, I'm not gonna name names, that was really guilty of this. In this particular TV show, people die, and then they come back, and then they die again, and then they come back again, over and over and over. It got really old. It didn't have the proper character sympathizing scenes necessary for me to worry about when they actually died again. In this particular case, I felt numbed to their attempts at conflict, which is something that you never want your readers to go through. Number 4. Tenses. This is something that always stands out like a sore thumb to me, because this was one of my biggest mistakes when I was a newbie writer. In high school, I went to a writing conference and I managed to place 4th in a writing competition. 4th meaning I didn't win anything. Afterwards, the judges came up to me and told me why I didn't place 1st, because I had switched my tenses several times. Somehow, up until that point, this wasn't really something that I paid particular attention to. That one conversation with those judges changed my view with tenses big time. So how can something so simple be such a problem? A lot of errors that come along with tense actually have to do with using simple past and past perfect incorrectly. All right, I don't want to scare you guys away, but I'm going to give you a grammar rundown really quick. Just keep watching the video. Simple past is obviously recounting something that happened in the past. Past perfect is recounting something that happened leading up to an event that happened in the past. Past perfect often involves certain key words, like already, until, before, and sometimes after. For example, I went to pick up my car, but they had already taken the engine apart. That is a past perfect sentence. If you want more examples, I would definitely Google until you get the hang of this. This can get really tricky when you switch from simple past to past perfect and then back to simple past. If you're already writing in the past tense and a character flashes back to a point further in their past, then you must use past perfect, even though technically they're both in the past. Most grammar rules can be learned naturally through reading without all of the confusion of these explanations. But this one in particular, I had to take time to research. Before I learned all these differences, I could read a sentence and know that something was wrong with it, I just wouldn't know what exactly it was. If this sometimes happens to you, then I would take a look at your tenses or see if there's some other grammatical mistakes in your sentences. Number 5. Show versus tell. You're gonna hate me for saying this, but this one's definitely a balance. You hear all over the place that you should always show and not tell, but sometimes telling is the better option. Show doesn't ever have to be longer than tell. It just has to make the reader feel. This goes along very much with number 1, which was wasted words, in that you don't want to ramble on and on and on about something if it can take you just a few words to tell it instead. That said, showing is what makes us feel so much more for the characters. You just have to make sure that you don't use too many words to do the showing. Oftentimes when I find something out of balance in the show area, it has to do with the character's emotions or how they react to something. Typically, you should never shy away from putting your reader in the character's seat and describing exactly what they're feeling, how their gut felt or how their chest felt tight or whatever the case may be, or if they're angry during the breakup. You should use more than just the words for the emotions. Alright, so that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure you subscribe to my channel. I post new writing videos every Wednesday. And if you ever have any writing questions or you have some suggestions for future videos, make sure to tweet me at Vivien Reis. Kira. Bye guys.